Right, well, Statistics South Africa's domestic tourism survey findings reflect a general pattern of increase in domestic tourism from 2020 to 2021. Tourism is expected to make a significant contribution to the South African economy as we head to the festive season. Business is likely to boom. Let's take this discussion further then. We are joined via Zoom by Tshifhiwa Tshivengwa. He is CEO at Tourism Business Council of South Africa. Very good afternoon to you, sir. Thank you for joining us.
Good afternoon, and thank you for having me.
All right, so what do you think about the findings of this survey? Are you agreeing, and do you see that indeed domestic interest in tourism has risen?
No, absolutely. I think the findings that have been published by SABC, really gives us what has been happening during COVID. If we go back to 2020 when COVID hit us, of course, the activities around travel, especially from the domestic side, were at a standstill because people were not able to move out of their homes. And if we move forward, we start to see that when we start to ease the restrictions, then South Africans started to travel their own country. And you can even see the patterns of when Gauteng was closed, because Gauteng still accounts for about 60% of domestic travel. You can see that people were not traveling. So it really is a pattern that we've seen. And It's a pattern that is exactly what was happening during COVID time. Yeah. And also it shows how domestic tourism and South Africans have supported the recovery of the tourism industry, because in 2021, when you see these numbers jumping and Limpopo being a place that mostly visited, followed by Eastern Cape, it shows that a lot of people were sitting at home for quite a number of months, and then they started to then move into those particular provinces. So it really shows a good pattern of domestic travelers really getting out, supporting the tourism recovery. Yeah. And also it shows that South Africans indeed do love traveling, and their own country has a whole lot more to offer for tourists.
Yeah, I mean, what does it say about the resilience of not just the sector and the industry, but really of South Africans? I mean, you talk about the support that South Africans continue to give the tourism sector. It really does speak to the resilience, doesn't it?
No, absolutely. And another thing that's quite important is that during that time where these statistics are really measuring, South Africans were also not allowed to travel to other countries. Mm-hmm. And this was due to the Beta variant, and then subsequently later on, the Omicron variant. And also those two variants were labeled as South African variants. So other countries, closed us in and say, well, we don't want to see anyone from South Africa. So what happened is that South Africa then started to look for deals, around their own country. In addition to that, suppliers, meaning the tourism practitioners and owners of businesses, also because tourists were not coming into the country, that supply and demand affected the price, and it meant that South Africans could travel to many places within South Africa that were otherwise highly priced. And by this time, most of these establishments were really putting their price at about 50%. And sometimes even lower than that, to attract tourists to come into the establishment to just get business going. So you can see that pattern also influenced the statistics, and that's why I've been saying that whatever we've been doing in terms of the regulations and also the variants that we've had during COVID has a lot to do with the numbers and how we see these numbers coming out now. Yeah. However, if you look at the international side, the international inbound side of things, it's only now that we're starting to see more and more tourists overseas coming to the country. But South Africans are the bedrock of the tourism industry here at home. And we want that to continue to happen. It shouldn't be something that just sparked by COVID, but we have to work hard as an industry to make sure that we accommodate everyone here at home, and we make sure that, we are, as South African, the bedrock of the tourism industry.
And what is your expectation in terms of, further improvements? I mean, you bring another dynamic into the conversation, the fact that, South Africans weren't actually traveling into other countries, but now they are going to start traveling into other countries. And I wonder if that then has an effect on the domestic traveling that they perhaps would have done instead. So is there expectation that, the interest will indeed improve and that we'll see more traveling within in the country, or that it will kind of stay where it is?
Well, it's inevitable that South Africans are going to travel out of South Africa, just like many other people travel into South Africa. So we will see many South Africans going to other destinations like Mauritius or Tanzania, and many other places in Europe and the USA. That will happen. However, what we are working on as an industry is to make sure that as many South Africans as possible travel across South Africa. We still have a huge market of South Africans that are not traveling, or that don't see travel as a good thing or as something that's good for their well-being. So we have a lot of work to do to make sure that there is education about travel, and also there is education about the pricing models across the various establishments across the country, and also to encourage South Africans to really travel. And that's why there are campaigns that have been run by South African Tourism, the Short Left campaign. There are others who have came on board. IDC came with a campaign with vouchers for South Africans to travel South Africa. So there are many, many campaigns that have been run to make sure that we maintain this momentum that we have. Yes, there will be outbound travel where people will go to other places, but we want South Africans to at least have a trip here at home once before you go outside, once a year or twice a year. Support the industry and make sure that, we're also sustainable here at home.
Well, Mr. Tshivengwa, I'll talk on a personal level, and this is just a quick comment that you can or cannot respond to. But sometimes I compare the prices, let's say, spending a holiday in Cape Town and, maybe taking a trip to the Maldives, for example, and I see that the prices are relatively the same. Mr. Tshivengwa, I'm going to the Maldives.
Well, that does happen, and I think that is a competitiveness of the destination. And also, other destinations have different dynamics. The Maldives may have a different dynamic to South Africa in terms of how they view tourism. You may find that in Maldives, the contribution of tourism to their economy is much higher. It's probably the engine of their economy. Yeah. In South Africa, there are other dynamics, and also there are other nuances that goes into it. So it does happen, and also supply and demand does play a role. So if we have more demand coming in, and of course we can't interfere with how people run their businesses, those type of things tend to happen. But what we are trying to do as an industry is to say domestic tourism is important, and we need to make sure that whatever we do as an industry, we support South Africans to be able to travel, or encourage South Africans to be able to travel their own country. That is key, and that's something that we're going to continue to do. And unfortunately, there will always be these variations of prices, but it's something that we are actively working on, and hopefully to improve over time.
All right. Thanks very much for speaking to us. It's always a pleasure to chat to you. Thank you, sir.